God in this wonderful program. Haven't found it necessary to have a drink today. What a miracle. And there's also another miracle about ready to happen here shortly, the story being told. But it's funny to get up this morning and I thought, well, there's no reason to shave. I can just sit in the back of the room. Nobody should make it go one way or the other than maybe Kelly asked me, and I can refuse Kelly pretty easily.
Yeah.
And here somebody comes along and says, would you possibly introduce me? And I said, I'd be honored. And what an honor it is. You know, he's one of the first people I met when I came to Missoula a few years ago. And when I met him, I thought he couldn't possibly be an alcoholic. Then he and I took a couple road trips. There's possibility. I won't bore you with any more story about that, other than the fact is, I think you're going to be looking forward to listening to this gentleman speak. So, no further more, Mike.
I'm Mike, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'd like to thank Stanley for asking me to speak today. It's been a little while since I spoke at this meeting. And I'd like to congratulate you on your 4 years. That's a long time to go without a drink. And I don't know, I wasn't nervous when I got here, but now I'm nervous. I don't know what that's all about, but because I have spoke quite a few times. And I believe that one of the reasons I'm sober today is I got to give it away to keep it, and I have to share my story, even though I think that, everybody knows me already, but, they don't know my whole story. I was born into an alcoholic family, and I was born and raised in Southern California, right on a beach. And as I grew up, since my mom and dad fought all the time, it gave me and my four brothers we just ran wild. And as little kids, I was a little surf bum when I was a kid. And we used to hitchhike up and down the coast of California, surfing and partying. And we used to love to do that because all the partying more than the surfing, because it was back in the 60s, and the hippies would pick you up and start getting you high, and you'd be, by the time you got to the beach, you'd be buzzed pretty good, and that went on, my childhood, and my mom and dad continued to argue and fight. As little kids, I can remember my mom throwing us in the car and running around all the bars looking for my dad, and they eventually split up, and because my mom got this really good job and advanced in her career, and my dad, his alcoholism just started going down. So they split up. My mom moved to Pennsylvania, and my dad moved back to Texas. And at this time, I was just, I had left home because they were splitting up, and my dad would, it's like I just had a lot of problems with that. So, and I couldn't drink the way I wanted to if I stayed home. So I left home at 16 and just started bumming around the United States, and back then, I guess nobody, cared, whether kids were running around crazy or not, because nobody ever bothered me. And until things got really, really rough, and I decided, well, I'll just join the Army. That's a free ride. They feed you and give you a place to live. And the reason I joined the Army is I got in trouble in Pennsylvania when I went to visit my mom. And I had to go in front of this judge, and he said, you're either going to jail or you're going to join the Army. So I said, well, I'll join the Army. I don't want to go to jail. Well, I joined the Army, and I did really good through basic. They lock you down. You can't go out and drink or nothing. So I did really good in basic. Then I got to AIT, and you had a little more freedom. And I started drinking, pretty regular. And before long, I was in and out of the stockade. I was always doing something, getting in trouble. And I finally had done something that they weren't really happy with. And I got court-martialed, and I got sent to Fort Leavenworth, which is the military penitentiary. And I think I had just turned 18, and this was a pretty rough place. So I had to kind of like build my body up and get pretty tough myself to survive there. And I did. And and I became just like another convict. I was just like everybody else, and I was, a matter of fact, I was down in the hole for fighting. I was always fighting in there. And they came to my cell, and I had already done 3 years in there, and I had 2 more to do. But they came to the cell and they said, "Oh, you've been your sentence has been overturned, and you're getting out." So I had went in with a bad conduct discharge. They released me. They upgraded my discharge to other than honorable, and they booted me out of the prison. And I remember the whole time I was in there, that 3 years, they didn't have AA in there at that time, but they had church. And I used to go to church, and I used to say, "I'm never going to drink again when I get out of here." Well, that day when they took me out of the hole and took me to the gate and loaded me in the van, and they took me to the airport to go. I was going to go to Texas where my dad was. And like I said, that whole 3 years, I was saying, "I'm never drinking again when I get out of here." Got off of that prison van, walked into the airport, and right into the bar. And it took me, the flight was only like from where I was at, I think it only like 3 hours or something. Well, it took me 2 days to get to Texas because I kept missing my flights. I kept going into bars, which I said I wasn't going to do, but I'm an alcoholic. And once I put that first drink in me, it was all over. I wouldn't stop. And, but I got to Texas. I hung out with my dad for a while. And then I just felt like it was boring. I always thought my life was boring wherever I was. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to go back to California." I went back to California, hung out with a bunch of old friends, and ended up in jail again. And, I was always ending up in the Ventura County farms. That was the town I grew up in. And that's, I just always ended up there. They just would skip the jail and send me right to the farm, and so I left California and came up here to Montana. My brother lived up here in Billings. So I lived in Billings for a little while. And it seems like everywhere I went, trouble followed me. I don't know why. But I eventually had I had so much criminal activity in Billings that I said, I better get out of here. So, I mean, I don't even know if they were looking for me, but I was so paranoid that I better get out of here because I spent time in the jail up on the top floor of their building, courthouse, and and I just didn't want to go to Deer Lodge or anything like that. So I said, "I'm going to go back to my mom's out," and she was at this time in New Jersey. So I went out to New Jersey, and I was 24, and I got out there, and right away I met a girl, of course, and she got pregnant, and so we got married, and I started working, and that's all I did. I'd go to work. On the way to work, I'd stop at the liquor store, pick up a half pint, and that would be the start of my day every day. And by the time I got home, I worked so hard I had to sit down and relax. And what it was, I was too drunk to stand up. And so that went on for quite a while. My job, they let me get away with my drinking on the job because I did do a good job at my work. And even when I was drunk, so that even made it worse because I thought I worked better when I was drunk. And it was completely the opposite. But so I just continued on the drinking and fighting in my relationship with my wife. And, it's eventually it got to the point where I was coming to AA. My first AA meeting was when I was 24 because I got pulled over and I didn't have a driver's license and I had to go to court. And they said, "You got to go to alcohol class and work on getting your license back." And so I went to AA and I did real good for a little while. As soon as they let me off of paper, as soon as I stopped having to get my card signed, I stopped going to AA and I picked up a drink. And for the next 20 years, I was around AA. I'd come in, I one time I stayed sober for 4.5 years, and during that 4.5 years, all I did, my wife at the time, she didn't understand AA or didn't want to, had her own issues or whatever it was. I have no idea. That's on her, but she didn't like AA. She thought I was always, going there to meet another girl or this or that. And, it's like, but I was going there to get sober, but arguing and fighting with her. And it got to a point where I decided that I was going to move out and work on our relationship. That was the plan. Well, when I did that, she had found somebody else. So that was over, and because I couldn't go back to her once she was, with somebody else. So that marriage was over, and it was, the only reason she went after me for child support and all kinds of other stuff. But luckily, my higher power was with me because she wanted to get remarried. And I said, well, if you want a divorce, you got to sign off on all this. So she signed off on all this stuff that she was trying to get that she didn't really deserve. Some of it she did, but not all of it. And so she signed off and I got divorced. And it was pretty smooth and easy. And, but I had started drinking again and I was out there running crazy. And I was living with a buddy who was in AA, and it got to the point where he said, hey, you can't live with me. You're drinking. Get out. So, and I would have done the same now today, and so I went and I got a sponsor and I moved in with him and into his attic, and I started staying sober. And that's, that was, when was that? Well, I'll figure it out later. But that was when I was going back to AA, and I had this friend, that same friend who had told me I couldn't stay in his attic anymore. We were still good friends, and he introduced me to Kathy, who is my wife today. And when I was sober when I first met her, but then I started drinking again. It's like, and she stayed with me, and I was so messed up that I didn't know what I was going to do, or I was having a hard time dealing with my ex and dealing with my son and all these other things, and my family's out here. So I decided, well, I'm going to move back to Montana. And I told Kathy I'm going to move to Montana. And first thing she said is, what, you're going to move to Montana? And I said, yeah. And so I moved out here. And because I had gotten to the point where we were living down closer to Newark, which is closer to New York City. And we were living down there. And so I decided, well, I'm going to move Kathy back up by where her kids are. So, she's, not stuck down there where I was living. So we moved back there and I moved out here. And we talked almost every day. She came out and visited and went back and then came out and visited again. And I asked her to marry me and she said yes. And that's why she's still here today. But it's, and in the beginning it was a little rough because I had got here and I started drinking again. And my brother at the time was still alive. He lived down in Stevensville. So I'd go down to Stevensville, drink down there, and then come home. And, Kathy knew it, and so one day I was down there drunk and coming back, driving up the, 93 toward, and I was passing out in between the towns. Like I couldn't remember passing Lolo or Florence or any of it. I couldn't remember. I kept blacking out. And I had a moment of clarity. And that moment of clarity was that I was going to drink away another wife. I was going to wreck another car. I was going to end up down in Deer Lodge. I knew what was going to happen. So I pulled into an Albertsons and I called Kathy up and I said, I need help. And she called AA and she got in touch with a fellow member who I'm good friends with today still. And the next day I was at the meeting, at his meeting. That was the solutions group. And when I was there, there's this guy that came up to me and started talking to me. And he said, "Come on, I'll take you to a real meeting tomorrow." And I said, I didn't know what was going on. So I said, okay. So the next day I went to the Missoula group. And it was at that time, it was at Woody and Pine down the stairs. And I walked down there and, I knew I was home. I knew that at that time, that was the place I needed to be, and that my first sponsor, I went up and asked him to sponsor me. And the first thing he said he said yes. Well, I think the first thing he said, "Are you on any dope or anything?" And I said, "No." And so he said yes, he would sponsor me. And he said, "You got to do 90 and 90 and, start writing out your first step, do this and do that." And it's like, first time in my life, I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I started doing it. And he said, that 90 and 90 is real, real important. And I think I was at the Missoula group probably my first 7 years, almost every night. It became like if I didn't go to the Missoula group, I thought I was missing something. It was just, I felt really at home there. I felt a part of. I mean, it changed my life, that group. And that group isn't my home group today because of life and jobs or whatnot. I had, I think I went to the solution, not the solutions group. The No Name was my home group for a while. And also, what was my other home group for a while? I don't even remember. But it's my home. The High Noon group is my home group today, and I think that's the best group in the world. To me, and when the Missoula group was my home group, that was the best group in the world. And it's I love my home group. I'm a part of my home group, and I know the other members of my home group, and it's just a great feeling to feel a part of. And for years I'd come to AA, sit there and get up and walk out the door and be the same asshole I always was. And I don't do that today. When I walk out that door, I'm still in AA. It tells us in our book, practice these principles in all our affairs. That means, to me, that means inside the rooms and outside the rooms. And I mean, the steps are what changed my life. The steps are what made me really become a part of AA. I mean, because if I didn't do the steps, I'd be sitting in meetings hearing people talk about the steps, and I wouldn't even know what they're talking about if I hadn't been a part of. That's why I always like to, I encourage newcomers, man, just stay, try to be a part of, get involved, because your life will change. I mean, for my life to change, I never thought I thought I would die in prison somewhere, or I never thought I'd live as long as I've been living, for one. And, today, I think that I wake up and think about AA. It's like, I wanted to qualify a little bit about, my drinking and, where it took me. And it took me all to bad places. But I really like to talk about recovery, and those 12 steps and being a part of. It's because I know for years I'd come in here and sit and listen and say, yeah, they're right. But like I say, I would walk out that door and I wouldn't say hi to nobody or get a sponsor or even work the steps. For that 20 years that I was around AA, I read that first step. I'm an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable. Doesn't say I'm an alcoholic. It says we admitted we are powerless over alcohol, and for years it was an I program for me. I was sponsoring myself. I was trying to do this myself. And all I found out and proved to myself is in and of myself, I can't stop drinking. I need every one of you. That's why today I feel that most important word in our steps is that first word, we. We can do together what I couldn't do alone. And that's the truth. That's my story. I couldn't get sober. 20 years around this program, I couldn't get sober because I wouldn't do the steps. And I love at the end of we read all the time how it works. It says at the end, practice these principles in all your affairs. For years, I didn't even know what they were talking about when they said principles. Today, I know what they're talking about when they say principles. The 12 steps are the principles. And I try to practice them in my life every day. I'm not perfect at it, believe me. God willing, I'm coming up on another sobriety birthday. My sobriety date is February 10th, 2001. So God willing, in another month or so, I'll have 25 years without a drink. And that is amazing to me. Well, don't clap yet. I haven't got there. But it's if you would have asked me 25 years ago, oh, are you gonna be able to quit drinking the rest of your life? I would have said, hell no. It's like I couldn't see life without alcohol most of my life. I couldn't see how the hell do you go to a barbecue and not drink? How do you go anywhere and not drink? That was my life at one time. Drugs are a part of my story too, but I learned a long time ago. I used to always announce to myself, I'm Mike, I'm an alcoholic addict, and by being around AA for the length of time and working with the old timers I've worked with, they said, I've learned how to respect AA, NA, GA, because I'm a member of them all. But when in an AA meeting, I always announce myself, Mike, I'm an alcoholic. And if I'm an NA, I'm Mike, I'm an addict. If GA, I'm Mike, I'm a gambler. It's like, and I learned that's just part of the, principles of AA, I have to acknowledge my disease on a daily basis. If I don't tell myself, when I wake up, I usually say I don't always get on my knees. I say in my head, thanks God for keeping me sober yesterday and do the same today. And those are like a few little words in it. And for the last 20 something years, it's been working, and my first sponsor, I know he was a big book thumper. He was a pretty tough AA member, I guess you could say. A lot of you might even remember it was Frank C. And he just, when I walked into the Missoula group and he was sitting over against the wall, I listened to him for about 2 weeks and I said, that guy drank like I did. That guy did a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that I did. He even showed me his prison cell down in Deer Lodge. It's like, so he was a lot like me. He was a lot like me. And he took me through those steps. The first thing he said to me when I asked him to sponsor me is he told me, and I thought I knew a lot. I've been around AA 20 years. I know a lot. He told me, shut up. You don't know shit. And he was right. I never went through the steps. I never went through the big book, and I started hanging out with that man pretty close because I wanted to stay sober. Me and Kathy had a good life started and I didn't want to drink away another one. I wanted to feel that, and in the beginning it was hard. You know, in the beginning, it was hard. I thought about drinking a lot of times. You know, my sponsor was building a house, and I was over his house helping him build it just to stay sober, you know, and you know, I started getting involved too in AA. AA, you know, well, that first sponsor, he told me you're gonna start washing cups, and I started washing cups. And I think at the Missoula group, I filled I was every position that our groups hold at one time. You know, eventually I became the GSR for the Missoula group, and I started coming to district, and then I started going to area. And man, and that opened my eyes to just how massive and big AA is. You know, I mean, our uh, our area takes up all of Montana. I mean, there's this, you know, that I mean, I by becoming involved in district, I found out just how vast AA really is. You know, because then you got to go to area. You know, you got to go see go see AA somewhere else. You know, and then when you start going to the different conventions and different things like that, I mean, our region is 7 other states. You know, and you start meeting people from these 7 other states if you go to any of the regional forums and whatnot, which you would if you become part of area or district, and you know, just really get involved in AA, and it'll change you. I mean, I know a lot of guys that are sober today, and and almost every one of them I see with long-term sobriety are involved in AA in one way or another. You know, like I said in the beginning, I used to love to fill positions. You know, I wanted to be the GSR, the secretary, the treasurer. I wanted to do all of it, you know, and today I kind of found my little niche, and I like to do service work at correctional facilities. We go down to the prison, go to the jail. I just went the other day to speak at some treatment center, and you know, it's like I love to be able to give back, you know, and and I guess the prison thing is really a big part of my sobriety because you know, I know what it's like to be in there. You know, I know what it's like to be, you know, have to live in a institution. And you know, and when I was locked up, they didn't have AA in this. This was back in the 70s, somewhere in the 70s. But you know, it's AA has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. I say that all the time, and I always say how corny I think that is. But it is the truth. You know, I have a life today I never thought I'd be living. You know, I got a lot of material things that I never thought I'd have. When I moved back to Montana, I moved here in my car with everything I owned in it. You know, and you know, it was another time I'm going to start my life over. Things are going to be different. And thank God I had that moment of clarity driving back from Stevensville, because I'd probably be dead if I didn't have that moment of clarity and realize that what alcohol was doing to me and where it was taking me. And because it took my dad died in his late 50s, I believe, of alcoholism. You know, they said it was a heart attack, but we all know it was due to alcoholism. He was in his late 50s and he looked like he was 80 or 90. You know, alcohol just destroyed him. And, you know, and I remember going to AA as a little kid with him, you know, and, you know, he did, I don't know if he ever got it. You know, as far as I know, he died still drinking, you know, but he was in and out of AA too. You know, maybe he just never had that moment of clarity. I don't know. But I thank God that I had that moment of clarity. And I thank God that I'm here today. Because if I I know if I would have continued down that road, I know where I would have ended up. And, you know, my first sponsor, I was going to wear the shirt. I got a shirt that says on it, he used to always wear it. It says, "Can you walk the walk?" You know, and I have that same shirt. Kelly got it for me for Christmas, you know, because she knows how much that shirt that saying means to me, you know, because for years, you know, I wanted this, but I couldn't walk the walk. You know, I couldn't ask a guy to sponsor me. I thought I was asking a guy on a date if I asked him to sponsor me. You know, and and you know, it took me, I had to get a little bit of humility in me before I could even ask that man to sponsor me. You know, I had to, and for years, I would have never told anybody that I broke down. My last night drinking, I broke down in that store parking lot and I was crying saying, I need help. And my whole life, I would never admit to anybody that I would cry. You know, I'm a man, I don't cry. But I was bawling my ass off in that parking lot because I knew where alcohol was taking me. And I think that most of us know where alcohol is taking us, but we don't know how to get off of that train, you know, and and walk the walk. I had to get off that train and I had to walk the walk. And I found out walking the walk, I had to learn how to do that. Just like a baby has to learn how to walk, I had to learn how to walk in sobriety. You know, I had to learn how to be a sponsor. And to learn how to be a sponsor, I had to get a sponsor, you know, you know, and, you know, like I said, I was around AA for 20 years and I never read that big book. You know, I read it with that sponsor. For the first time, I read that big book from the blank page, which he made me write on that blank page, "Shut the F up, you don't know nothing." And then we got started, you know, and we went through that book. And I still today, and it's funny because I bought the house right next to my first sponsor. And I still look out the window, or I could see out in my backyard, and I look at the window where me and him used to sit and do sponsorship. You know, and I'll never ever forget that man, you know, because he saved my life, you know, and there were some people had issues with him, but I know he was a good man. You know, he might have had a bad past just like me, but other than that, he was a good man, you know, and he was in his 30 years sobriety somewhere and when he passed away. And you know, it's when you see long-term sobriety, I mean, and then you see if something happens to him, you see AA show up. You know, it's like I mean, my first sponsor, they filled the church down there. I don't even remember the name of the church, but it was a big church, and they filled it for his service, and just like they filled the room down there for Dave for his service. I mean, it's like when you become part of AA, you become part of a family that is massive. I mean, I don't know everybody in here, but I would say I know at least 80% of the people in here. You know, and it's because I've been around and I stay around. You know, it's like I know because I researched it for 20 years. I researched it, that if I stop coming to AA, it's only a matter of time because that's what always happened. That 4.5 years after that, I stopped coming to AA and I picked up a drink. 90 days, pick up a drink. You know, it's like if I don't come to AA, I will drink. That's what's in my head. So I just keep coming to AA, you know, and I'm almost at the nooner every day. I mean, if I don't get to the nooner, I feel like I'm going to miss something. You know, it's, you know, a birthday, or I even ask, you know, Jim's there every day too. And don't mean to cross talk, but, you know, he calls me and I always say, did anything happen? What's going on? You know, because that was the same way. That's why I was at the Missoula group for my first 7 years, because I thought I would miss something, you know, and whether it be good or bad. Because I mean, especially at the Missoula group, it could be good or bad. But that group saved my life. And today I still like to take a cake down there to celebrate my birthday, you know, and you know, it's I don't know, if you want a life beyond your wildest dreams, all you got to do is just stay in this, get a sponsor, go through those steps. It's, I do things today that I never thought I would do in sobriety. Like I get somebody calls me to somebody needs help, and I'll go help them. If I need help, I can call people and they come help me. You know, Before it was like if somebody needed your help, you needed something in return. And today that's not the way my life works. If somebody needs help, I help them. I don't want nothing. And most of the people that help me, they don't want nothing. We just have a friendship. And that's the way this program works. I mean, I'm good friends with a lot of people in here, and I was thinking the other day, it's like I can't hardly remember any friends growing up. I got a few, but most of the good friends that I remember are dead because of this disease. And it's I don't know how I wish I could just get everybody to come in here and stay. But nobody you got to make that decision on your own. Hopefully, whenever I speak, I hope I plant at least one seed to make your drinking miserable or to make you come back. Most of the time, if you come into AA a few meetings, your drinking career is over, especially if you're alcoholic. Believe me, I pounded on the bar many a times. How did I get started again? Or, to hell with it. Give me another one. It's, today, I can't tell you the last time I even thought about drinking, or the thought of alcohol came into my head. I mean, the only time I might think about alcohol is if you see the commercial on TV or this or that, but I don't think about drinking it. I know today, for me, alcohol is poison. And I mean, I think it's poison for everybody, but alcoholics, we got this disease of the mind that I got an allergy to alcohol, that when I put that alcohol in my body, boom, I don't break out in a rash or anything, but I break out in drinks or handcuffs. Not every time how does that go? Not every time I got in trouble. No, I can't remember that. Well, almost every time I got in trouble, I was drinking. That's the bottom line. I don't know how they used to say that, but I mean, every time I would wake up in jail, and I know guys that woke up in jail with murder charges. And, I always, usually woke up by, fighting or trying to break into something, or, I always was doing something when I broke both my ankles jumping off of a liquor store because I was trying to break into the liquor store, I mean, do normal people do that? No, I needed more alcohol. So, and I was successful at that a few times, and I didn't look for money or anything. I'd look for alcohol because that was my riches. That was what I wanted. That was what changed me, I thought, into a better person, a likable person, whatever, and today I know that alcohol will kill me, and it almost did. I mean, driving back there from Stevensville, blacking out, I could have wrecked that car and killed myself, but my higher power was with me. I don't know, I have a higher power in my life today. Like in the beginning, it was the Missoula group was my higher power. Today I got God as my higher power. And the only reason I got a God in my life today is because of AA. It tells us in that book that, it's designed to help us find a power greater than ourselves. And like I said in the beginning, it was the Missoula group, but now it's God today. AA brought me back, because I thought when I got here, oh no, God, he don't want nothing to do with me. I'm on my way to hell. There's no turning back, and that first sponsor, he had me do some crazy stuff to help me reconnect with my higher power. I mean, I went to he got me involved in a church play. I mean, I was a disciple, and I was a Roman guard, and I did that the first year, and I said, this is a big commitment. I mean, all the rehearsals, and I ended up doing it for 4 years. And because of that, it helped me reconnect with my higher power, and that's one thing that sponsor used to always tell me. He used to say, we come to AA to stop drinking. And if you want to know about God, go to church, so, I mean, I don't go to church every day or every Sunday. I feel my higher power in these rooms. I'm in a church every day in a meeting, and that church I go to for that meeting is my church. So, I go to church. It's I look at AA as kind of my church today. This is, you are my people, and I just love this program. I love the opportunities of service that it gives us. I mean, and if you're not involved in service, get involved in service. It saved my life. I mean, 100%, it saved my life, and that's because I had a sponsor who said, you're going to be a service, so I don't know. I think I got about all I got to say. I might be in it a few minutes early, but I'm running out of stuff to say. And I don't want to start saying the same thing over and over. So thanks for letting me share, and thank you.